Hello and welcome to this video where I basically just want to talk about one set. What set is that? Kynmarchers Cruelty. What I want to talk about this set, well, in the beginning of December, SOS did some changes to the Endless Archive. One thing was renaming it Infinite Archive. Another thing was that the extended favor buff, which buffs the duration of named buffs, so major and minor buffs and debuffs, now applies to proxies. And what everyone was looking at was, of course, Daedric Trickery. Kynmarchers is sort of the debuff variant of that set, and for that reason I feel like it was very much overlooked, and I think it's a great set, and that's what I want to talk about in this video, why I think it's a great set and how I apply it. So what does Kynmarchers Cruelty do? Well, let's look at the buffs. So you have a 2, 3 and 4 piece which gives health, stamina and armor. These are all good buffs. Health is nice, stamina recovery, especially using the esoteric greaves, very nice. And the armor helps you reach armor cap easier, so that you can have more choices in terms of CP and still reach armor cap. So that's very nice. But we're here for the 5 piece. What do you do? Well, when you deal direct damage, do we have direct damage in our kit? We definitely have a lot of direct damage, since our spammable elemental susceptibility is direct damage. You apply 1 of 5 major random major debuffs to enemies within 8 meters for 18 seconds. This effect can occur every 8 seconds. So this 18 seconds can be more than a minute. And 8 seconds duration, that means that if we count up, okay, that's 5 random. So every 40 seconds we should apply 1 of each, about ish. And only enemies within range. Well, enemies within range, that one can actually be hard. 8 meters is not a large distance, so you have to get used to playing on this spell, stacking on top of the what you want to hit. This is not very nice if you want to kite a marauder, for example, so you have to think about that. But for the most part, most people know that we use line of sight a lot as a solo player to stack adds, so this really shouldn't be a problem being on top of enemies. Anyways, what we really want to look at is, okay, what are these debuffs then? Are they worth what we are essentially trading for it? Well, Major Breach, well, that's the dot of the bunch. Major Breach, of course, is on the elemental susceptibility. And for the most part, adds and bosses only have 9,100 armor. So we quite easily overpen inside the Endless Archive, or Infinite Archive as it's called now. It's only really Thawad where this might be nice, but in the third part you'll most likely get it from the elemental susceptibility. Anyways, there are 4 more debuffs. Major Cowardice is the one we really want. Major Cowardice, of course, 430 reduce weapon and spell damage. Well, the adds only have between 200 and 1000, so this debuff alone will reduce the damage on some adds to 0. Now we combine this with, for example, Minor Cowardice, as we have access to on the Warden, and we're looking at about 645 reduced weapon and spell damage. We will take a lot of the adds to close to 0 damage, and that's what we really want from this set. But so this is really the debuff that we really want, and this is what makes the Nightblade quite strong in this archive. If we have Major Defile, is this buff useful? I would say yes, especially in the later arcs like 8, 9 and 10 plus. Major Defile helps get a lot faster on mad fights, because there's a lot of adds that heal in there. It's namely the totem mages and the infusers, and once you get to those arcs, we're talking about millions of healing done. Major Defile will reduce this by a lot. Earlier arcs, not so useful, because at that point it's a lot easier to have these adds bashed at instantly, so this is more of a late arc thing. Then we have Major Maim. Major Maim, 10% damage reduction, not too shabby. And then we have Major Vulnerability, and this is a really good buff, because it's a damage taken buff, and that's multiplicative with the damage stun buff that we get on focused effort. If you've noticed the build I have, I don't use any of the sort of aggressive CPs giving damage stun. Why not? Because these are additive with the focused effort. So you're looking at 2,500 increased damage, and if you put on one of those damage CPs, well, that's 2,506% increased damage. Those are that is not a very big buff to your damage, and that is what is called relative decreasing returns. Also often called diminishing returns, even though that's not really 100% correct use of that term. it means the same essentially. But major vulnerability is multiplicative. This is an actual 10% damage increase, and that's very, very good. So we have one amazing buff, and we have 4 or 3 not too bad buffs, and one sort of bad one in Major Breach. And that makes it a really, really nice set actually, because it's a really good chance that we're getting something that's not too bad. Plus, it's more than a minute duration. So if you proc this once, it's basically 100% uptime guaranteed from the point that you're proccing. And that's really what we want to look at. So when are we going to proc Major Kynmarchers? Are we going to proc it in time? And it's a yes and a no. In Arc 6, not always. Ad fights in these Arc 6 are usually around the 40-second mark. At 40 seconds, there's a really good chance that you have Major Kynmarchers. Not always, but there's a really good chance. But once you start getting to Arc 7, 8, 9 plus, ad fights are in the minutes, and at this point you're pretty much guaranteed to have it up, and that makes this sort of a late arc build, so an Arc 7 plus build. Why do I like this so much, and why do I like it over my old build, which was basically just about the enchants? Well, this has some really nice benefits. One is we also get some other buffs like major vulnerability. The other is that it's AoE. And that's very, very nice for one specific thing. Trash fights, as I've mentioned. Notice I haven't really mentioned bosses, because for the bosses, we pretty much just do the classic build of Heartland Conqueror and Torx, and we will have the most insane weakening enchant and we'll take no damage. But really, the majority of things you're doing in the Endless Archive is trash fights. And in the trash fights, weakening is not going to help you that much. Weakening is going to help you with the Marauders. But for everything else, this is very, very, very nice, because it's AoE. It's everything that's around you is getting this debuff. Plus, the trash doesn't have that much weapon and spell damage, as I've mentioned, so you can reduce it to 0. I did a 9 arc run, and I felt a lot more comfortable using this, because of what it does, which is just make the trash fights do a lot less damage to you. And that's why I use this. This set also works really, really well in sort of a bad RNG scenario, which you will often have in the Infinite Archive, where you get a lot of focused effort, but you don't get a lot of enchant buffs. Well, if you only have one enchant buff, this set is actually, I'm not 100% certain, but it's very, very close in performance, even on bosses to Heartland Conqueror. And that means that it's good in those scenarios where you don't have good RNG. You can sort of swap in this set, even on bosses, till you start getting RNG and start getting those enchantment visions. This also works on the bosses where you may be afraid of the weakening glyph, which is the largest sort of critical response I've gotten to my build is, well, weakening is single target, how do you control it? Well, Kynmarchers is AoE, so for those that are afraid of the weakening build because of the control, Kynmarchers is a great option. There's also some boss fights where even I would think, let me try Kynmarchers instead. So there's a lot of appliance. You don't need to use it for every fight, but it's a very, very nice set to at least have on hand. So this was me explaining why I think this is a great set, what it does, and sort of going over the buffs. Now I want to talk about how I apply it. So if we look at the trash scenario, what do I like to combine? Well, I like to use Torx Pact on the body and then Kynmarchers front bar. That's also a very nice benefit that you can wear it front bar, because it just need to make sure that you proc it every 8 seconds. It doesn't need to be double barred, and that means that we can get Torx on double bar, and Torx will also buff our backbar enchants. A nice additional buff. We also see me wearing a light sash here, or a belt, because of the armor buff, which then allows me to still reach armor cap even with one light piece. So these are sort of how I apply it. I of course also always combine it with Major Kynmarchers. How I play it inside the Endless Archive is basically always on trash once we reach Arc 7. I feel like this setup is the perfect trash setup from Arc 7 onwards. As I explained, you need the trash fights to take long enough to sort of make sure that you get this debuff, or otherwise it's not so much worth it. There's also an alternative setup which I've talked about before in my other videos, which is of course using the hardening glyph front bar. If we look at this setup, we have the hardening glyph front bar with a weakening glyph back bar. Again, this is a setup for trash. And why do we use this setup? Well, we use this setup for the arcs where we get the Marauder early. There are a lot of people have experienced this, where they get the Marauder in the very first trash fight as soon as they come out from the thorough fight. We've all tried this. It almost sometimes feels like this is more likely than anything else. But if you get the Marauder here early in the arc, well, no more Marauders can spawn until the next arc, and that means you have a lot of trash fights from now on where you know there's going to be no Marauder spawn. And then you don't really need that weakening glyph front bar. You can then go for the hardening glyph front bar and get that extra comfortability in the rest of the trash fights for the rest of the arc. I actually prefer getting the Marauder in the very first cycle, because then I can do this and I know this arc is going to be a lot easier than it otherwise would be. And that was basically it for this video. I'm just going to show the setup once more in Superstar and just go over so that you can see the specific pieces and enchants, because the Superstar add-on is not the best at showing every single enchant and so on. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment them down below. I make sure to respond to almost every comment that I get with actual questions. And that was it for this video. Thank you for watching.